to Building a Fighter, sponsored by Trader Joe's Sparkling
I
Water.
clearly have the superior sparkling water, which is pineapple Waterloo.
That's
So
definitely not true.
let's please get
Raspberry lime sparkling water from
let's
Trader
please get
Joe's.
Waterloo to sponsor this podcast.
I'd be okay with that. Yeah, I like both. I like both options. Pay us money. Anyways, welcome back to Building a Fighter. My name is Dr. Austin Shane. With me, as always, Alex Friedman. He's a badass strength coach in
I was about to be
Colorado.
very upset if you didn't say that.
But so today we want to talk about why MMA fighters should golf. And Alex, you brought this up a couple weeks ago. I nixed you at the time. And then I
Yeah.
thought about it more and I came back around and said, Alex had a good idea. So I want
Yeah.
it on record right now.
No.
But since it's your topic, what are your thoughts?
Well, I appreciate that you're putting that on the record, but just so everybody else knows, there's no good idea that Austin hears until he makes it his own.
100%.
So my good idea wasn't a good idea until he pondered it and made it a good idea.
It
So
wasn't a good idea at the time. It's the right time
you guys all see what I have to deal with, right? No, all MMA athletes should golf. It's kind of a overlaying topic that just relates a lot of cross training, but in my mind, I like golf because it forces you to use a different kind of side of your brain, right? MMA fighting is extremely like fight or flight dependent, right? And really good fighters get out of that fight or flight and they can be analytical and really calculating with that with their fast reactions too. But golf to me is a mental battle and acute skill, a more closed type of environment that you get time to relax, you get time to just focus in on what you're doing, and then you can really hone in on your process. And I think that calming type of atmosphere and environment can do you mental wonders once you do get into your training scenarios that you're more fight or flight or more amped up or chronically up. So I like the dualistic properties of kind of the mental game, but cross training and I think we can talk about the physical gains too. Just rotational power,
now.
the ability to cross train to gain movement patterns to increase the rate of learning a new skill. Right, all that stuff is super valuable in my opinion. So that's why I brought it up, and it was a good idea then, and it's a good idea now.
It is a good idea now. And as somebody who that is my background, the only two sports I played in high school were wrestling and golf.
You're a liar. You
Um,
told me you ran cross country.
I did that in middle school, homie.
Well,
Um,
probably
but
sucked.
yeah, that was great actually. But either way, so golf, it's one of those things that not a lot of activities you do are more frustrating than the game of golf. And like thinking about it from a striking example, right? Like typically when you're striking, even high level striking, we're talking Izzy and Bahia. Like there's going to be a stalemate for the majority of the time, but eventually you're able to capitalize. You're able to capitalize on the opponent's mistakes, right? You're able to really impose your will when you want. Thinking about like when Izzy played possum on the cage and went for that knockout, or Bahia in the fourth or fifth round in the first fight. But in golf, the variables don't really change, and you still can suck, right? It's not like the person in front of you is this master. It's the same fucking course. One day you can shoot an 82, the next day you could shoot 102. And there's nothing different other than you're fucked up top. That brain isn't in it. You're not able to do what you're doing. You're not able to focus and get through the frustration that is having a bad shot, shaking it off, and then popping back in there and hitting a good shot right away. Having that goldfish memory, like Ted Lasso says. But golf was so good for my mental state and being able to lock in and have that goldfish memory because the best rounds of my life, I had the worst holes of my life.
Yeah.
Like one of 18 holes was like a 9 or some stupid shit. But the best rounds of my life always had one of those holes, and then the next fucking 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 holes, I go on a goddamn tear. because I forgot about that and said, let's go get it again. And I was able to shrug it off. That helped me so much in like a wrestling tournament, so to say. Like
Yeah.
you lose in the semifinals. Like I lost my senior year in the semifinals of state. And I had to go, and everybody knows you lose in the semis, you're probably wrestling for fifth or sixth, right? Like you're just we're on this peak. If I'm in the semifinals, I'm going to the finals of state. You lost, and you're on an adrenaline dump, and you're losing that next match for the most
Hmm.
part. But I was able to kind of lock it in and focus on the task in front of me because I've trained at that skill so many times with the game of golf growing up and focused on being able to have that goldfish memory and jumping back into being able to perform at a high level without that affecting me.
Well, I'm glad that golf did that for you. When I lost in the semis, I just got mad. I went on a fucking tear on the backside. Um, I was just mad. So that was the
Yeah.
opposite effect of golf. Um, but I think if we can boil it down to three aspects of like a sport like golf too, let's not get pigeonholed into just golf. But I think MMA athletes need to find some type of recreation, right? Because one, we talk about the physical benefits of a rotational sport, right? And rotational power and dynamics. Things like disc golf do that for you. Things like slow pitch softball, all things that
Tennis.
are pretty casual, right?
Yeah.
The second thing is this mental reset or these skills that we can gain from putting ourselves in a different context, right? Frisbee golf is similar to golf. What slow pitch softball is a little bit more open, but still pretty slow in its pacing and controllable. But then I think that third benefit is what I want to touch on right now is it allows you to enjoy a piece of your life or take something slow and do it just for the participation and the pleasure of it, right? Because so many MMA fighters get really pigeonholed, and I get it. You need to be obsessed to make gains and get to the top level or to be a professional athlete. That should absolutely be part of your journey. But sports or activities that force you to slow down and take your time, I think increase your ability to recover, to mentally switch off, to live a healthy, more holistic life rather than constantly berate yourself with the next training session, next training session, next training session. And because I don't care what you're doing in an MMA setting, there is so rare to get a low intensity MMA practice in,
Right.
right? Even if you're hitting mitts, right? Hitting mitts, you can say that's your lowest session of the week. That's low. Hitting mitts is still a high impact and dynamic endeavor,
Right. It's a
right?
high CNS load.
Exactly. So, you need something else to kind of balance that out. And a lot of MMA fighters don't turn off, right? They're goers, right? And so, in a sense, we can replace turning off, quote unquote, with an activity that you're still pursuing to get good at. You're still having fun at. Like I know a lot of MMA athletes that turn into either high level or high ambition golfers and like really get after it. So the juxtaposition of that slow and recreational type of pursuit, I think helps balance out the MMA athlete's life and lets them even train harder when they are in the room.
Right. I mean, it forces you to be able to kind of turn off, like Alex is saying, like a lot, even if it's not like it doesn't have to be, I guess, like a sport, so to say. Like yoga is a really good example. A lot of MMA fighters get into yoga. That is
Hmm.
just a hobby in and of itself. It's a form of cross training, which at the end of the day, that's all this is. It's cross training, doing something else, not for competition, but just for fun, and cross training in different skills that are going to make you better as an MMA fighter.
Yeah.
Like golf, even if you don't look at it like that, there's all these other activities like fucking doing puzzles. Like it's not going to do much for the physicality of anything, but if we're talking about cross training in a holistic environment where the mind comes into play as well, you best believe doing something like that is going to increase cognition and be able to problem solve better, right?
Yeah,
Like
absolutely.
that's another thing that I know a lot of fighters like to do. Like they'll the more stoic fighters I've found, or like wrestlers, they love fucking going out and just doing puzzles.
I mean, I see a
I
lot of
hate
fighters.
puzzles.
I enjoy puzzles. I think puzzles are fun. But I see a lot of fighters playing chess after sparring, or
Mm-hmm.
I think chess has come on as a strong hobby for a lot of fighters.
Dude, there was a little
But
bit there because when me and Angel and Manuela all got obsessed with chess when we went over to Dubai,
I'm sure you
and
watched the Queen's Gambit.
Angel did. I did not watch that.
Mm.
I heard it was really good though.
It's a decent show. I enjoyed it.
But we came back, and then there was for a little bit there. Fight Ready was on a tear of just everybody just I'm obsessed with chess.
It's not something I can get behind. I'm not into the openings and memorizing moves. I'm more of a checkers guy.
Yeah, that says a lot about you.
I actually had that thought while I was rolling today. Speaking of my hobby type of sport, where I'm turned on the gym all day, yelling and screaming and going and going and going. My turn off sport is jujitsu. Um, and I was actually thinking today, like when we were going over techniques, and some guys, a lot of jujitsu players love to talk technically, like let's talk about this position, let's do it, and then they ask questions, but what if this, what if that, and it was like, and I had the realization, like that's not at all how my brain works. That's not at all. I can't sit there and talk through a position.
Right.
Like I need to feel it.
Technique.
And yeah, that's just not for me. I need to feel it a bunch, and then when we do live rolls, there are zero thoughts in my head. I promise you, that's what helps me really clear my mind. That's where I get into a little bit of like a flow state, and I've realized in jujitsu, I'm just chasing like flowy scrambles. Like sometimes I'll jump on a submission for sure, and that's probably a part of my game I need to get better at. But I'm looking to just scramble and get into some funky positions and fun shit. But that helps me turn off, and that kind of juxtaposes my life. Um, what I wanted to capitalize on what you were talking about with like movement dynamics, right? We could talk about golf, but I had recently had an athlete, Julian Marquez, who had trained. He like it was a light switch that flipped. He all of a sudden understood rotational mechanics because he videotaped himself in slow mo throwing a frisbee disc golf. And I'm like, and he's sitting there, he's like talking my ear off about how his hips need to open up as he rotates, and he uses the front foot as like a leverage point, and I'm like, yeah, man, I've been trying to talk to you on that with a med ball for 5 weeks. But disc golf flipped the switch, and he understood why he was limited in his like T-spine and his rotational power capacity. And I was like, man, if that does it for you, I'm here for it. I love it. And I loved hearing that story. And but yeah, and then he did like 100% better on the medicine ball throws that we were going into that session.
It sunk and it was good to go.
Yeah.
You ever play disc golf?
A couple times, once or twice, just hanging around butts. I think it's kind of fun.
I fucking love disc golf.
That was
something I got obsessed with in Portland.
Mm.
That was me.
It's a very Portland activity.
It is. There's disc golf everywhere in Portland.
I'm sure you were drinking an IPA on the course too.
PBR.
Real fruity. Actually. Oh, really? I guess PBR makes sense. Yeah. It's kind of hipster.
No, that's why I said it. No, I'm not a PBR guy. You ever heard of Montucky?
Yep.
Dude, Montucky's are my shit. No, not a mule. A beer.
Yeah, I understand. I don't know why I said that.
But Montucky's are my shit. We just carry on just like our old mini golf days.
Carry on
frisbee golf.
Hell yeah.
But, yeah, dude. I want to go play frisbee golf now.
I want to go golfing, which I'm going on Sunday, so that'll be fun.
Where are you playing?
No idea.
Who are you playing with?
Well, my head wrestling coach that I coach with at the high school. He texted me. He's like, "I'm getting itched to play golf. You want to play on Sundays? Absolutely. Tell me when and where." So we'll figure out.
When did you get clubs out
there? Earlier this summer. I forget. I think, or maybe Christmas time when my parents came and visit. They drove them out.
Fuck yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. That's something I refuse to get back into golf. Yeah. Like, even though I was on the golf team in high school, I took basically all of college and Cairo school off. So I'm back to basically shooting hundreds again.
Dude, I played for the first time in probably 3 years, like a month ago maybe. I surprised myself. I did pretty good.
Yeah, I will play once a year. Every time I go back to Illinois and I'm with like Eric and Christian and all those guys, I'll play golf with them.
Are you playing in August here?
Maybe. I don't know. That's weddings. They're different things.
Yeah, right. There's a little bit of stuff going on.
Yeah. But last time I went out, I think I ended up shooting like 110 or something after. So that sucked. Yeah. But the first hole I chipped in out of the sand trap for birdie, and I fucking chucked my club in the air. And I said, I don't care about the rest of the day. I'm fucking done.
It had the opposite effect of what you were talking about, screwing up a hole earlier and then locking in. You
All I
did
got was
magic on the first hole, and now the
I got
rest you gave him
so
shit.
happy. Chipped in out of the
Oh
bunker. I've only
fuck.
ever done that like 4 or 5 times in my life. And I did that, fucking chucked in the air, and then the next drive, fucking sliced onto the street.
Oh god. Yeah, that's how it goes. Um, okay, I digress. Rotational mechanics, awesome. Why don't we talk about the bare bones basics of rotational mechanics, like either throwing a punch, or throwing a med ball, or why that in itself warrants being a movement skill as much as a squat or a deadlift or a press, right? Like because rotation is part of your primal movement patterns, correct?
Yep. Yep. So rotation in and of itself is just a pattern, right? We
Yeah,
always think about like we think about exercise for the most part in the form of sagittal plane movements. We think about it like a squat, like a deadlift, like a press. And so often we neglected the rotation aspect, but rotation is a primal movement pattern that you can train and happens in day-to-day life, right? We just didn't
yeah.
train it in the gym because it wasn't stressed, because most machines it's really hard to turn into a rotation movement.
Yeah, dude. And I would argue that like rotation is the fundamental movement pattern of all sport and human movement more than anything sagittal plane.
Yeah, 100%. And it's one of those things that rotation in and of itself, like we can digress or dive into it a little bit, is I look at rotation through a lens of ipsilateral rotation and contralateral rotation. Those
Sure.
are those are my thought processes. And like a contralateral rotation pattern is going, and basically what that means is ipsilateral, the point of the shoulder and the point of the hip, the ASIS, are going to be, or pelvis technically, are going to be pivoting in the same direction,
On the same
or
side, yep.
on the same side. So the right and right are pivoting around. Think about like rolling onto your left, like on your back supine position. You're rolling onto one side or another. That's going to be an ipsilateral pattern. Contralateral patterns are going to be where your apex of the right shoulder is going to move in sync with the apex of your left pelvis, right? So it's going to be almost like running would
Yeah.
technically be a contralateral stability pattern.
Yeah, and that's kind of my argument for even for um contra for rotation being a primal, the most primal movement pattern is like human beings were designed mostly to
Right.
run, right? Mostly to run. So contralateral rotation, like think how your foot strikes the ground. There's a rotational power component to
Mm-hmm.
that as it travels up the chain. I think again, all of your joints and muscles are designed to contract and stabilize rotationally, um, as well as do the other planes of movement. But I think rotation is the foundation of that.
Well, and what's cool is rotation, since it is a pattern in and of itself, it is a pattern that you can get better at. It's a pattern that we can train. It's a pattern that almost every aspect of what we're talking about with this cross training concept, that's why it makes sense. It's because rotation in and of itself is a primal pattern that we can train, right?
Yeah.
So all
Yeah.
this cross training that we're doing, like playing slow pitch softball, that is still rotating in the exact same direction, right? Throwing a baseball, actually throwing a football, has extremely similar mechanics from a stability and rotation standpoint to throwing a cross, right?
Yeah.
Um, so all of these different things, even though they look like they're doing separate stuff, are actually playing into the fact of training that rotational capacity, if you will, because that's for the most part, we're getting general stimulus if we're cross training. We're not getting any specific stimulus for the most part, even though a lot of people are thinking like, oh, rotation is specific, but if it, I don't think that it is. I think rotation is more general because it is a primal pattern.
Yeah. You
But
can make it specific, and you can select drills that create specificity. But yeah, in a like the rotational med ball hip toss is general.
right, exactly. Just like swinging a baseball bat is general. Throwing a football is general for a MMA fighter.
Yeah. 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 Absolutely.
Swinging a golf club is general for an MMA fighter.
Right. And so we increase the capacity of that because we're just inherently doing it more in our life when we add those type of activities. But then also you think about golf, you think about so much softball, disc golf for a lot of reasons. I forget what the other one was we threw in there. Tennis. They're all power sports,
Mm-hmm.
right? They're all strength and power sports. So like when I'm driving out of the tee box, like yeah, I need to tone it down so I can actually get it on the fairway. But if I had my way, I'm gripping and ripping. I'm
Right.
letting it go, right? If I'm hitting a backhand in tennis or forehand, I'm gonna rip that thing through. So a lot of those. trying to hit a home run in softball, like just straight up rotational power. And if we increase that power, that absolute output of power in, let's say, in batting in slow pitch softball, it doesn't matter if we do that in slow pitch softball, if we do that in the weight room trying to throw a med ball, or if we do that wherever, it's going to have a positive effect on our punches.
Hmm. Well, and what's cool is I, I want to get your take. So, what do you think? Do you think that striking is the most rotational endurance of all of the different sports? So I'm like
Hmm,
I'm trying to think because you're
of
right. Almost
sports.
everything we do is like tennis, rotational power, golf,
Hmm.
rotational power, pitching, rotational power. Like all of those are rotational power, but there's not a lot of
Hmm.
rotational endurance needed. What's a sport that could get better at that? At tennis,
Row,
maybe
rowing, kayaking.
kayaking, but how much rotation is that actually?
Oh, well, I guess if
Or I
you're
guess kayaking is,
or
rowing is not.
paddleboarding,
Yeah,
right? Yeah, yeah. I guess that's what I meant by rowing. Rowing is a little more sagittal, but like kayaking or paddleboarding, that's
yeah,
a little
that's a
more
good
endurance based.
that's a good idea.
Um, what
Because that could be
else?
a weak area that's not being trained a whole bunch, right? Because,
For
like
sure.
you said, every single piece of cross training that people enjoy doing, from what we've said so far, is rotational power.
Yeah.
But if there's an opening to get better, then that's if those are all the most popular things, there's probably like you're neglecting the rotational endurance, which would be like a kayak or a paddleboarding
Throwback here, racquetball. I mean, that's
racquetball.
a
That's
little bit
rotational
of
power.
power, but you get a lot more. It's a higher workload.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I think those would be good. And in thinking, I got a question for you now. In thinking training rotational qualities, right? Think about our rotational primal movement pattern, training it up and down the force velocity curve. What do you use, or what's your go to in doing that with like maximal strength? Or how do you strength train a rotational movement pattern?
I like landmines.
Because okay, yeah,
Um, Landmines are really good for that because you can load them up pretty heavy and we can train that rotation. Um, I mean med balls, but it's hard
that's
to
a little
get
more
the
power. Yeah,
specific side. Exactly, it's hard to get the specific side um, at like a 40-pound med ball. It's not like you're able to throw that very far. It's not effective.
yeah, yeah. I like
Um,
that a lot. One thing I've started isolating is with like my pushes and pulls. I do it a lot of cable machine. I think cable machine's a great
yeah,
uh tool
I
for
guess I
this.
use.
Whether we're doing,
Yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
well, I was gonna say I guess I do use that. Something that I'm thinking though is like a sled. What I do a lot is a sled with a rope attached
Yeah,
and doing that like rotational.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's where I
Because
was going. Even
you can load that real heavy.
yeah, even going with like a let's say like a cable single arm row. So the cable's about hip height. You're either in a squat stance or half kneeling or whatever, and you're just rowing it with your shoulder, right? Like I feel like a rotation in a row has been deemed like poor form, right? And has
Right.
been deemed as a bad thing to do.
That's the
And
only
yeah,
way I teach people to row anymore. I don't
right.
teach them to do like a stable row.
Right, yeah, yeah. Like you're moving your shoulder in synchronize with your trunk, and like as long as we're not getting any lumbar extension, or
Right.
purely getting the rotation from our hips, we're good, you know. And so I think that's a really cool way. And like I know you do a lot of push pulls with the cable machine and
Mhm.
stuff like that. I think that can get your thoracic spine rotating in more of a strength environment rather than a power or a capacity environment.
Yeah, I guess that is something. What I do use probably the most is have you seen those like 3D straps?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Is a 3D strap attached to our Kaiser or attached to our cable stack.
Hmm.
I use that a lot for rotational strength because you can just train that transverse plane and
Yeah.
you can as long as you can add more weights. I mean, fuck, I'm not having people do 200-pound rotations.
Dude, you know
So
what I want to try now? And you brought up the sled, and I don't know why my mind went here, but if you attach like let's say like a TRX to the sled, you take a lateral stance to it, and then you kind of rip it across your body and see
I
how
do.
you can move it.
I literally just did that today.
Nice. Yeah, I've never tried it. I'm curious now. I
I
kind of
call
want
them
to.
sled windshields, or
All
sorry, sled
right.
windshield wipers.
Okay. All right. I can
So
dig.
one of Alatang Haley, that's in his block this month where you load it up, dude. You can do it with no weight, and that just shreds the fuck out of you. But
I'm here for it.
yeah, but I threw on there because he got a little cocky. He started talking.
Hmm.
Started talking. I taught him some like English phrases, and he started talking a
Yeah.
little shit.
Yeah.
So I'm like, all right, let's throw 25 pounds on there. Let's see how this goes. He fucking hated me. Those things were so hard.
I
Um,
wonder if running does anything for rotational capacity. I think it's so minimal in a
well, so
running sense.
yeah, so I think of rotation and stability patterns in the same kind of lens in my mind.
Yeah,
And it's just the DNS in me. But like running is something I do to offload all the ipsilateral patterning that the athletes do, right?
yeah,
Because everything in MMA for the most part is an ipsilateral stability pattern. Sometimes you need to offload that to not put more miles on the system, so to say.
yeah.
We want to actually like dewind them if we're thinking about doing the same pattern over and over and over again. It's just winding up
Hmm.
something. Um, we throw in like a running, so to say, not super far, not super long, but just running as like a regular like active recovery stimulus. And that actually makes them feel so much better because they're getting that contralateral pattern that their body craves, but doesn't always get due to the demands of their sport or due to the demands of what they do every day.
Oh, yeah.
Like
That's
that's
really cool.
why I think personally, like people coming off the couch or people that work at a desk all day, they feel so much better when they get into like a functional patterns like gym or something like that right away. That makes their body feel so good for a little bit. And then it goes back to
Hmm.
normal once they adapt to the stimulus again. But it's because their body craves. If you're sitting at a desk all day, that's just straight up and down. That's a homolog pattern. You're not really doing any rotation or any sort of like stability, increased stability demands. But your
Yeah,
body craves those in order for it to function well. For a proper nervous system to fire, to be able to synchronize muscles well, you need to train that pattern. So instead of just sticking with just fucking squat, bench, dead, all of that, adding in some rotational movements at the beginning to just kind of grease those wheels or grease those patterns makes your body feel almost athletic, like you're an athlete again, because
nice,
it's starting to get that stimulus that it's looking and craving.
nice. I just keep imagining like the 80s aerobics power walkers. They got the sweat wrists, and they're like adding
Oh yeah,
rotation to their walk.
yeah.
That's what I'm
Those are also
about,
the
dog.
ones that yeah, those are also the ones though that just kept shearing their low backs and just everybody had a disc issue.
We're not worried about that. We're not worried
Fuck them
about that.
boys.
Right. So why would that affect your back there, Austin? What's the problem between rotation and lumbar extension?
Well, it's a few things. So
Yeah.
those types of videos, the main reason is because that they're doing this flexion extension moment over and over and over again. If you watch them as they're going, so
Yeah.
basically the low back fucking hates flexion and rotation at the same time, especially when it's really loaded. It does not like that. It puts pressure on the disc. It causes a shear force to actually go through there at an extremely high rate. And typically, that's if there's going to be a catastrophic reason for a disc herniation or protrusion, whatever it may be. It's going to be a flexion rotation moment.
Yeah. Well,
But
okay.
well, and with that, so that's just one thing. But then again, so those for the flexion extension, like you're talking about, that puts a lot of pressure on the facet joints. So as we rotate, the lumbar spine actually only has about 5 degrees of rotation each way because of the way that the facet joints or the joints that put the vertebra together, they're kind of like puzzle pieces.
Yeah.
Um, the way they're oriented is it's like a straight up and down. Like if I'm doing a neutral grip on a bench press, that's how they're oriented. So if you think about that, the way they are, the anatomy doesn't let the low back rotate a whole lot.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be stable through rotation. But if we're extending back, that cuts down on surface area and makes part of that facet joint closer to the other one. And then we rotate, that's going to literally just smash those facet joints into each other over and over and over and over and over again. And
Yeah.
those are the types of people that really respond well to actually like a chiropractor, like adjustments. Because what
Yeah.
adjustments is going to do is it's going to do the opposite. It's going to be a quick relax or stretch effect, and it's going to put them into a quick flexion rotation, not enough to really cause any sort of like disc bulge or air issues like that, because it's only one stimuli, not a bunch over and over and over again. But it's enough to break that cycle of the facet joints touching each other and causing irritation or inflammation, and then it's going to cause a relaxation effect because it gets rid of that static posture or that pressure on the facets.
Nice. Yeah,
So,
that's awesome.
yeah.
So get adjusted, y'all. Um,
Yeah, especially if like fighters, like fighters low backs because of
Mm,
grappling and
or
extension rotation, flexion rotation.
yeah,
Like not everybody needs to be adjusted. I don't believe that, but grapplers, it does a great deal to help them as long as there's not like active disc herniations in the area.
yeah, and I think too, it's a common um, like misnomer or mistake to think that like, oh, they're a grappler, they're super flexible, they can rotate and
Right.
bend their body, contort themselves so different ways. But like the fact of the matter is, there's so much chronic tension and isometric stress that they're holding positions that they lose a lot of that range of motion in a relaxed state.
Well, so and on top of that, so I was actually just having this conversation with one of our building a fighter athletes, just shooting the shit with her. Was grappling in and of itself is such a high neural stress sport and such a
Yeah,
high neural in like neurally like the nervous system, the
yeah,
pressure
talking
that it
about fight
takes,
or
the
flight.
tension it is. Well, that, but just on stretching the spinal cord, like you're in loaded flexion of both the cervical and lumbar spine at basically all points in time in that sport,
Yeah,
whether it's jujitsu or wrestling. Somebody sprawls on top of you, your head's down, so that's just stretching the spinal cord from the top. You're grabbing a leg, you're hanging on a single leg with their hips on top, so your low back is rounded. You're trying to pull yourself to that shot, and you have another body weight on top of you, which is low back flexion. And it's just going to put all of that pressure on both of those areas, which is going to cause the spinal cord to then get stretched and tensioned further and could cause some sort of irritation along the lines of like a neurodynamic irritation.
yeah.
So
My back and neck hurt just hearing you say those
yeah, but
positions.
do you think about how often we got into those positions in
Oh,
the
absolutely.
practice room?
Yeah, and
Like
still do.
over and over and over again. But
Yeah.
that is why disc herniations are so prevalent with people that get into jujitsu on the recreational side.
Yeah.
Because like the reason we could do that over and over again is because our tissues adapted to those demands of wrestling since we were children.
Yeah.
A 40-year-old coming from fucking Hertz rent a car coming in and doing jujitsu, that's not, they're not adapted to that tissue
They're
demand.
not
Their
ready for that.
body, their discs aren't ready, their spines aren't ready, their bodies aren't ready. And guess what? Boom,
For
disc
the,
herniation.
yeah, they're not ready for the intensity or the capacity, right? Like, because the live rolls are intense, period. And then you're going to do 4 or 5 of them and, oh, you're done.
And Alex, so how do people get their tissue ready for the demands if they want to pick up a hobby like jujitsu?
They train with a strength and conditioning coach or pick up some sort of exercise routine at buildingafighter.com.
Correct answer.
Bang bang. Yeah. But no, like I mean, jujitsu in itself, and I think this is a fun little topic. Like we talk a lot about cross training and other sports preparing you, and we're talking about rotational sports currently. Um, but jujitsu is a great way to get in shape, right? You can't deny some of the physical benefits of that,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not biomechanically measured, right? And few sports, if any, are, right? And so if you get into working out or get with a strength coach or get with a personal trainer or somebody that knows how to organize a decent program in front of you, it's going to be balanced with your 7 primal movement patterns. It's going to be a little bit more balanced for the intensity and capacity that you're ready for, the intensity and volume that you're going to meet a person where they're at, essentially. Um, and it's all relatively controlled movements, right? And so that's the biggest mistake I see when people is like, I want to get really good shape, I'm going to start doing jujitsu, or I want to get in really good shape, I'm going to join a CrossFit gym, right? It's like,
Well, the thing is, so many people think that like you have to always do high intensity shit when you get into the weight room, right?
right,
When jujitsu people think weightlifting, they either think bodybuilding or CrossFit. They
yeah,
don't think that it can be a really good mix in between both those things with
functional training, yeah,
different functional training involved as well. And that's what really the difference is because we started the entire podcast. You can train rotation. It is
yeah.
something that can be trained in the gym and prepare you and prepare those tissues for the demands of jujitsu.
Well, and you get in a problem with everything with moderation, right?
Yeah,
Like if you're an MMA fighter and all of a sudden you're golfing 6 days a week,
yeah, it's a
there's
problem
a magnitude of problems going
for
wrong
your
with that.
wallet and your body.
Amen. Yeah. But like jujitsu or CrossFit and like that, the endorphin rush of that high intensity bullshit is real, right? I enjoy that that rush or that thing. So I'm going to keep going back to it, keep going back to it, and my body be damned.
Yep.
So
Yep. I like it.
there we are. So you should play golf. You should do rotational sports. So pitch softball
Do
is really fun.
cool shit. Don't
Don't
just
just
be
don't
one
just sit on the
dimensional.
couch. Yeah.
Yeah. Don't just sit on the couch and play Rocket League, Austin. Okay. All right, guys. So if you got to get in touch with us, all of our information is in the show notes. It's going to be Instagrams and emails. After that, we're also going to have our Building a Fighter programs available at buildingafighter.com, which Alex so eloquently plugged earlier. So that's going to be pre-made programs. It's going to be membership options. It's also going to be custom programs as well. And then finally, as always, it's Dr. Austin Shane.
Alex Friedman.
And we are out.